Edison Jackson enlisted in the military in November of 1942. Some of these newspaper articles that interviewed him said that he had stated, after this incident occurred, that he just took a notion to go home and he did so, and therefore he was considered AWOL. And since he was considered AWOL, of course, he was being sought after by law enforcement. And Jackson, knowing this, decided instead of going to his home in Briceville, that he was going to stay with his aunt in LaFollette. Word got back to the Anderson County deputies that Edison was in fact staying in LaFollette at his aunt's house, and therefore they came to LaFollette to pick him up. His aunt lived very near where Woodlawn Cemetery is, and the deputies showed up and they arrested Edison without incident. He came out and surrendered, and they handcuffed him and put him in the car. But when they got near to Edison's home, they decided to allow Edison to stop to either get a change of clothes or eat. I'm unsure of what the terms were. Different articles state different facts about the reason why they went to Edison's mother's home, but the law enforcement officer transporting him, Officer Fox, did in fact go to Edison's mother's home with him. Here at his mother's home is where things took a turn for the worst. So it stated that Edison wanted to eat, and the Officer Fox told him no, he needed to just get back in the car and he would get him something to eat when he got him to the jail in Anderson County. And there are several different versions of what actually took place and transpired within the home. But basically, a scuffle happened, and Edison, while handcuffed, threw his cuffed hands up around Officer Fox's neck and began choking him. Things must have been more laid back or more casual back then, because for some reason Fox's wife was with him on this trip, and she pulled Edison off of her husband, and that's when the scuffle occurred, and they were rolling around, and Edison was going for Fox's gun, at which point Edison's mother, Cora Jackson, retrieved Officer Fox's gun and handed it to her son, who is still in cuffs. Edison takes the gun and fires 2 shots into Officer Fox's back. Somehow during all this commotion, Edison's grandmother, Mrs. White, who was also at the home, somehow she ended up getting shot, grazed by a bullet in the hip as well. Officer Fox ended up passing away from the injuries due to the gunshot wounds he received. And Edison was in a full-blown panic at this point, and decided that when the ambulance that showed up to take his grandmother to the hospital over her gunshot wound, he jumped in the ambulance and still with Officer Fox's gun, and demanded that the ambulance driver drive him to LaFollette. And so Fox and his mother and his grandmother are in this ambulance, and they are on their way to LaFollette. The ambulance driver, whose name was Sam Martin, was later interviewed, and he told the newspaper article that he was so terrified when he pulled out that he burnt the recap off of his tire, and he continued to drive to LaFollette with the recap torn away from his tire. And he said that even though it was only a 20-minute drive, it felt like hours and hours. Edison Jackson was captured in the ambulance in LaFollette and taken back into custody and taken to Anderson County Jail. Edison eventually was charged with manslaughter of Deputy Fox, and there seemed to be some confusion at the trial. His attorney had suggested that Edison had lied about his age in order to join the military, and that he actually wasn't even 18 years of age as of yet, and therefore the court agreed to allow him to serve the time, his 2 to 10 years, in a detention facility rather than prison. However, when he got to the detention facility, they determined that he was in fact over 18 years of age and refused to let him serve his time there, so he did end up going to prison for manslaughter of Deputy Fox. I'm not really sure right now what happened to Edison, but it appears as though he passed away in 1945, just 2 years after this incident. I'm going to continue to do research on Edison and see if I can find out his cause of death. I also did notice that even though Edison was considered an Army deserter and he went AWOL, that he does have a military headstone. He is buried in Anderson County. Deputy Fox left behind a wife and 3 children. He is buried in Anderson County, Tennessee. So that's the story that I have on the wild manhunt in 1943 in LaFollette, Tennessee. As always, I appreciate all the comments, likes, views, and shares. And if you like the content of my channel, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And if you hit the little bell button, you'll be notified anytime I upload any new videos. And remember, a person is not forgotten until the last time their name is spoken. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.